Hi, welcome to Money Control. This is the first of the webinar series of webinars that we are organizing to bust some common myths about GST. The country is in the middle of the biggest reform initiative ever to be undertaken in independent India. Goods and services tax came into implementation from July 1, ending 14 years of sustained negotiations between the center and the states. At one point, it looked that it's never going to be implemented. But having said that, after a grand event in Parliament, the GST kicked in from July 1 in India. The first of the seminar, we have titled the seminars GST Simplified, and the first of the seminars is going to concentrate on busting some common myths about. One of the common myths is that small and medium enterprises are going to get badly affected by GSTs and is going to increase the tax burden. To discuss many of these issues related to this aspect of GST and how it's going to affect SMEs, we have with us Saloni Roy, Senior Director with Deloitte India, who is a tax expert, who is a law expert, and has worked in various capacities advising clients across GST, VAT, tax dispute, M&As, and related areas. Welcome to the show, Saloni.
Thank you so much.
I would like to first start off by asking you, has the purpose of GST been solved? Given that we are only 2 months old into the new system, do you think that GST's promise of stitching together a common national market has been achieved?
I think a lot has been done. We can't have a perfect GST system in India, considering that we are a federal country. But considering that, a majority of the indirect taxes, we had multiple taxes, as you'd be aware, excise, VAT, service tax. A lot of those have been done away with, entry tax as well, octroi, local body taxes. The rate of tax now is uniform across the country. So, and we have common laws, the central GST law and state GST laws. So practices are common mostly across the country. So yes, I would say it's a huge step towards a national common market.
Do you think that small and medium enterprises were caught a little underprepared when GST actually started getting implemented?
You're right. They were caught a little unaware. Actually, we all know the history of GST. Like you started off by saying 14 years, it's taken our country to adopt GST. There was a lot of dithering that, whether we'll actually see GST on 1st of July. And I must share that it's not just the small and medium enterprises. It was even larger companies who thought that maybe GST could get postponed. But yes, I think the larger population of the small and medium enterprises, businesses, they were mostly caught unaware. And I think maybe we could have done a better job of creating awareness. And, maybe the seriousness, though there were several messages sent by the finance minister that there will not be a delay in GST implementation. But I do believe that there wasn't sufficient preparedness, especially since the law itself came out late. The rates of taxes were announced fairly late. Even till today, we have, changes, modifications, clarifications coming today. So I don't think the entire transition has been managed entirely well, but it's good that we stuck to our date of 1st of July.
One of the major concerns so far as GST and small and medium enterprises are concerned is that small and medium enterprises are actually not accustomed to the technological requirements of using GST or moving on to the GST system. One of the biggest concerns expressed by traders in the run-up to the implementation of GST has been that most small and medium traders in India do not have, let alone filing returns on, they do not even have a computer at home in their places of work as well as their factories. So it has been said that lack of technological preparedness and lack of technological acquaintance is going to affect their transition into GST. What do you think is the status on that?
Yes, technology is a huge play in GST, and the purpose behind use of technology really is to ensure that it's smoother for compliance purposes, both for the taxpayer as well as for the tax authorities. It's good to have technology because it will reduce the interaction with the tax authorities, the bureaucracy. None of us likes visiting the tax department ourselves, so it's an easier interface. But saying that, you mentioned there are many businesses where they don't have a computer at home Yes, that is the reality of India, but we have to see, we have to move to another age. We have to advance. So we need to keep that picture in mind and move ahead with technology. There are facilities which are made available that, even if you're not able, you don't have a computer at home, there are available, tax advisors or consultants or other third parties who can help you with your compliances. But saying that, it is always better if you are doing your compliances yourself, because it's fairly simple. It is, initially it may take a while, but with time and ease of once you do it a couple of times, then you probably learn the process. Yeah.
So another big question that has cropped up since July 1 is that how do you file returns in GST? And now there is growing anxiety, not among just small enterprises, even among fairly medium and large corporations, that filing filing returns on the GSTN portal, which essentially involves filing returns for inward supplies as well as outward supplies, is quite a cumbersome process, and that has led to some kind of resistance, particularly among small and medium enterprises, most of which were not part of the formal economy. Now, since GST has come into force, and since they would be buying supplies, they would be buying raw material, and they would be selling their products, and they have to file input tax credit. They have to claim input tax credit, and they have to file 2 sets of returns. Do you think this is something that is this is one aspect that the government could have prepared more so far as the trading community is concerned?
You're right. Filing of multiple returns, a minimum of 3 returns every month is fairly daunting, considering that previously, say under a VAT system, it was either a monthly return or quarterly return followed up with an annual return. So yes, filing 3 returns is challenging, but the reason behind these 3 returns, it's important to understand that, is so as there is this matching concept which you might have heard, which is for the input tax credit. It is essentially to ensure that all transactions in our economy are actually captured. So if I supply goods to you, it is captured in your return, which is your input tax return, and it gets auto-populated. So it's not necessary that you will need to actually input that data, but you get a chance to verify that. Yes, filing 3, I'm not dithering from the fact that 3 returns is a large task. So for every registration, you have close to 36 returns that you need to file in a year.
So it effectively means that isn't owning a PC, or isn't owning a PC for a small and medium enterprise is almost a necessary condition. It's going to make their life far more easier under GST.
I think we all need to, accept technology, because that's the way, the world is moving, and we need to embrace it. And yes, we should have, modern equipment to comply with, our tax requirements.
Another question that has been bothering small and medium enterprises are the multiple rates of taxes and services. Effectively, there are 5 slabs, if we include 0 as a tax, nil as a tax slab, and small and medium enterprises, which actually is the backbone of the Indian economy, think that these multiple tax slabs have made their life far more difficult than what it is now, than what it was before. And after GST, it means that they have to keep tab on everything that they buy and everything that they sell. Even if they were filing returns earlier, it makes their life far more difficult now, and it makes a little more complicated for them. Do you think the tax slabs could have been fewer?
I think the tax slabs which have been determined by the government, essentially, it's the 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. Broadly, most products are covered in the 12 and 18%. These are the standard rates. Essential items are covered in the 5% rate, and luxury items are in the 28%. There are also goods which attract a cess, so the compensation cess. So that's another basket of rates that need to be considered. I would believe in most SMEs, yes, it is a challenge determining which is the rate of tax that is applicable. But I would also say that, having these buckets is also essential, because we're moving from a previous excise and VAT regime into a GST regime. Most products we would see that the effective tax rate should have come down. There are some which haven't, but most products we should find that there is a change in the tax rate with additional credits. Ideally, in more mature economies, there are not as many rates. If you look at the EU, there may be 3 rates at the max. Yes, in India, maybe it will take time for us to gradually move to that state. But yes, having multiple rates is something which is a requirement as of now. But I believe in times to come, we may not necessarily require as many rates.
There is also this question about composition scheme in which small and medium enterprises whose turnover is below a certain threshold need not pay, only needs to file a composition scheme, so they're entitled to probably lesser amount of tax, and that has created some degree of confusion among the trading community, and as also among small and medium enterprises who run small factories. Do you think technology can help them overcome this confusion?
So essentially, composition is offered to traders of up to a particular threshold. So 75 lakhs is the threshold. It allows dealers not necessarily, they apply a flat rate of tax on all their sales, but this tax rate, they're not allowed to recover that from their customers, so they need to bear that tax amount. Technology will help in all forms. I mean, for GST, it is essentially driven by technology. So whether you're within composition or outside, it's similar, but the ability that composition allows you is that you don't have multiple rates. You have a single rate which you adopt, and it's applicable across.
There is also this fear among SMEs that you will need a CA, a chartered account, the help of a chartered accountant now to file returns, whereas in the previous case, in the previous system, you actually could do it all by yourself, and filing, self-filing of returns was almost a done deal. But now, since you need to file 3 returns a month, which you yourself said is a little daunting, the advice and the assistance of CA is a must. Don't you think that is a prohibiting factor?
I agree that, at this point of time, at least at the initial stages when GST is new, for people who are not very financially savvy, you may need the help. You will need the help of an external advisor. It's better to have that assistance. But after a few months, maybe 2 or 3 months, I don't think that requirement is entirely necessary. It is something that you could, adopt and do on your own. And I can share that that's something that I'm experiencing as well. While dealing with clients, it's not it's not that difficult that you cannot do it on your own.
So there are certain classes of SMEs. Say, for instance, a restaurant owner, and within restaurants there are 2 categories of rates: one who is running an AC restaurant and one who is not running an AC restaurant. Within hotels, for instance, there are 2 categories of rates, GST rates. One that is offering room at tariffs below 7,500, and one that is offering tariffs at above 7,500. Now, this has led to a situation, for instance, where hotels are charging tariffs offering tariffs at just below 7,500 rupees, just to reduce their tax burden, both for the clients as well as for themselves, and started charging on other rates, other services which were otherwise offered free. Do you think this such multiple slabs in rates within the same category of products and services has actually created more confusion?
Yes, actually, in the hotel sector, it has created confusion, considering that we're having multiple rates based on this rate, the slab you have the tariff of a particular room. And room tariffs actually vary depending on season, category, there are various offers. So yes, it has created confusion. So it is advisable that in the future we do have a single tax rate, a single tax slab. But until then, yes, this does create confusion. You're right.
There is also, and the biggest question that is looming over all SMEs is that GST has increased their tax burden, and it is forcing them to raise prices of products and services that they offer. Is that correct?
I would disagree with that statement. The reason being that GST actually has brought multiple taxes together. Earlier we had VAT, excise, service tax, entry tax, and a lot of these taxes did not allow credit against each other. So India suffered for something called tax cascading. India is considered as one of the most highly taxed economies of the world. if I was to look at it globally, the highest tax rates that exist were in countries like Hungary, which was a 27% VAT rate, and Gambia, which had the rate of 40%. India, anything that you would have bought previously in the previous scenario, it would have an average tax burden of approximately 30%, approximately.
So that's the tax incidence you were saying?
Yes, the tax incidence. Now, with GST coming in, this I'm talking about products, you would find that a lot of the products are now being taxed at 18%. And there is this concept of anti-profiteering, which has also been introduced in the GST law, which essentially means that the manufacturers need to pass on the benefits that they've received in terms of tax rates as well as credits. So you are eligible for additional credits, and we hope, and I think some products have already shifted, given benefits to the consumer. So I would disagree with the comment that GST has led to an increase in costs. There may be in some sectors, some industries that there is an increase, but I would not say that that's true in all cases. I would actually think that for most products, it should have benefited. For services, of course, there has been an increase from 15 to 18%. But again, in the service sector, there should have been some marginal increase in credits.
So there is also, good that you mentioned about anti-profiteering. I was going to ask that question in any case, is that anti-profiteering, the provision of anti-profiteering, while the body is yet to be formed, the authority is yet to be formed, the provision itself has caused a lot of anxiety and fear among industries across all income scales, particularly SMEs, and they believe that there is this belief that the anti-profiteering body is going to eventually evolve into very regressive kind of is going to lead to very regressive kind of an Inspector Raj regime, and which can be exercised by tax inspectors and people of and the tax bureaucracy to clamp down on people, even if though they are actually filing returns according to what they are required to. Do you think that's a genuine concern?
I think the concern is regarding the vagueness around anti-profiteering and how it's going to actually be implemented. So we don't have clarity today as to whether anti-profiteering will be considered by the tax authorities on a product basis or a company-wise basis. What is the methodology that is going to be used? So there is a kind of ambiguity surrounding this entire sphere. And that's what is leading to the concern. I don't want to at this point of time conjecture that it will lead to an Inspector Raj or, there will be, investigations. I don't want to say that at this point of time. But I think the message that the government has actually been very clear in delivering is that they didn't want GST to be inflationary. They want, businesses that have, benefited from GST to pass on that benefit to the final customer. So that's really been the message of the government. And sorry. So I think that's really the purpose behind it. But saying that, if there are businesses which have benefited from GST, they should be looking at passing on the benefit to their customers.
I'll come back again to the question of technology, because GST, unlike any other tax systems in India that existed before GST, is exceptionally technology driven. For everything, you need to be technology enabled. To bring in efficiencies, even in your line of business, you need the use of technology is something that is more than a necessary condition. So if, say for instance, a chemist shop, a chemist in a small town, or any small trader or a small retailer in a small town now has to file GST, assuming that he or she was filing the VAT returns previously, he or she could have done without owning a PC. But now that option of not owning a PC and yet filing returns is not available. Don't you think owning a PC under GST is actually going to bring in huge amounts of efficiency in the businesses of small and medium enterprises in India?
I think owning a computer or any form of technology, to have embraced technology, is something that we should look forward to. There is a phrase that I've heard, which I think is fairly drastic. It says, adapt or die. So, but that's essentially, adapting towards technology. We all need to embrace it. It's like mobile phones, which, 20 years ago, we didn't have them, but we've all, taken to them at all different ages. So, yes, the older generation has, an averseness towards technology. But I think there are several people I know, who are fairly savvy as well. So it's a bit of both. I think each one has to determine and take it upon themselves to benefit from technology and what a computer has to offer. I also want to share that for VAT returns in the past, for most of the indirect tax compliances in the past, they needed to be done online as well. So it's not something that is drastically new. So it is something that was there even previously. There were waybills which were in some states where you needed to do a physical application, but most of the other return filings, most states had actually gone online. So it's not, yes, it's a new system, but it's not entirely different in the sense that we did already have technology and requirement of compliances online, even previously under the VAT service tax regime.
There is also a strand of thought, and those who say that the resistance to technology by SMEs or people who have not, who are actually not willing to get on to GST is because they are seen as tax evaders, and so far they have been evading taxes. And now, since GST is such a technology-driven system, which is everything has to be done online, and you need to be technology enabled to become GST compliant. So if you're not technologically efficient, and if you're not technologically savvy, you cannot get onto GST. And if you don't get onto GST, if you evade taxes, you will get caught under the new system. Is that a reason why there is so much of resistance to GST by some class of businessmen?
So we all recognize the fact that in India we have a parallel economy. I think GST in some form, because it, with the use of technology, hopes to track all transactions, and it, in a way, hopes to achieve, getting all players, all businesses to be part of the entire tax regime. So it, in a way, enforces compliance because all transactions need to be reported. Yes, there is a resistance to technology because you need to report all the transactions. I don't want to necessarily put a blanket that those who are resisting technology are the ones, so it's not necessarily that's the reason because they don't want to report. Maybe they do want to report, but they're a little fearsome in their mind. They may be wanting to comply, but just a little unsure of how to use technology. That may be the reason.
So you're giving them the benefit of doubt to begin with. There is also the question about SMEs believing that the GST system is very heavily skewed in favor of the large corporations and against small and tiny traders. What's your view on that?
I think smaller businesses have now, just GST to deal with, and GST also, like I mentioned, you don't have to necessarily deal with the tax authorities. It's going to be an online interface. So I think that's an advantage. The other advantage that it has is there are uniformity in processes. So mostly what you do, say in UP or in Delhi or in Haryana or Maharashtra, there'll be similar systems, similar tax rates. So I think all of that is good, and I think we should look at it positively. Yes, because it's a new system, anything that is new always scares us, most of us, but I think it's a tax we need to embrace because it has huge advantages, and not necessarily only for the corporates, it's for everybody. It's you and I as end consumers as well. One of the biggest attributes or one of the biggest characteristics of GST is that until GST came along, India was like 29 different markets. So if a good was being produced in Tamil Nadu and it had to travel to Delhi, so it had to pass through 5 different states and paying local taxes all along the way, and there were entry barriers. So what GST has done is it has dismantled physical barriers among states. It has formalized the entire economy into a common national market. By the time GST settles down, and by the time SMEs and also the large corporations get accustomed to the new tax system, the small and tiny traders, small and micro traders actually get over the shock that they believe that they have been subjected to, India would have become a far more efficient economy so far as the marketplace and supplies of goods and services are concerned. By when do you think the equilibrium will set in? Difficult to give a date, but I think maybe in 2 to 3 years. we should see significant change. I mean, even today, if you see the news over today, the reports that have been put in the press is that there have been significant amount of, what the tax collections have been better than had been anticipated. I think close to 70% of those who've registered have filed their returns. So they're very positive signs. So I believe that, it's just a matter of time when, and yes, there will be teething issues, and I don't deny that one bit. But I think within a span of 2 to 3 years, we should have a great GST system.
And also there is the question that, GST gives small and medium enterprises an opportunity to get onto the formal economy and reap the benefits of growth. So far, they have been primarily outside, and they are the one who are operating outside, just outside the perimeter of the formal economy, and have not been, have not been able to partake of the boom that the Indian economy has been going through over the last decade or so. So GST is a great opportunity for SMEs to become part of the formal economy, reaping the efficiencies, and actually benefit from several characteristics that are hiding in the details of the system. Which are the characteristics that the SMEs can actually exploit for their own benefit?
I think the fact that, there is uniformity of tax rates, uniformity of procedures. These are all benefits, logistics costs. So earlier you would have seen, trucks waiting at the borders for clearance. All of that should reduce. It has already come down because there were no waybills also. So earlier there was this Form C, Form F, and at the checkpost there was always someone checking the vehicle. So, the transport time, all of that is to the benefit of the SMEs.
And what about the tiniest of the micro traders, say for instance a neighborhood mom and pop grocery store? How does it benefit from GST?
So it depends so if you look at GST, there's a threshold limit up to 20 lakhs in major states. In the northeastern states, the threshold is 10 lakhs. So the requirement to pay tax only arises after you cross the threshold. So assuming that they've crossed the threshold, they have the option of adopting the composition scheme, where they don't need to necessarily look at, what is the tax rate for all the products I'm selling, and just pay a standard rate, assuming they're within the 75 lakh limit. Beyond that, what it does is that, you have to be part of the GST system, where, there is tracking of all transactions, which means that you're actually contributing to the, we all need to pay tax. We need to pay what is the right amount of tax. Nobody wants to pay extra tax. But at the same time, one doesn't like being the one paying tax and other one not paying tax. Right. So we all need to recognize that as citizens, we have a duty towards the nation and pay the right amount of tax.
I'll conclude this by asking you one last question, and by asking you, what do you think is the one characteristic of GST that you have seen since it has been implemented over the last 2 months that you did not think existed in the system and has been of great benefit to small and medium enterprises?
There's nothing that I felt that did not exist. I thought the fact that, it's going to be, I wasn't actually, I thought states have the power to vary rates, 2% below or above. But I was very pleasantly surprised that states have not exercised that power, and they're keeping the rates uniform across India. So I think that's a huge advantage, that you don't have a different rate, say, for any product, whether it is jute or fabric or anything, maybe a shampoo or air conditioner. So it's the same rate across. So I think that's a fabulous, it's showing that a maturity from the state finance ministers that we want to keep the rates uniform, and it should be driven by business, that you take your decisions and not by tax rates. Warehousing, now you don't need to determine based on, companies used to have multiple warehouses, but you don't need that any longer, just for tax efficiencies.
Thank you so much, Saloni, for this wonderful perspective on various characteristics of GST, and especially those that affect small and medium enterprises. We would have loved this discussion to go on and on, but unfortunately we have to call it time. Log on to moneycontrol.com. We'll come back to you with a series of seminars on various aspects of GST and small and medium enterprises over the next few weeks. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.